What did you just say? I tried to laugh, but the sound died halfway. You must be mistaken, I just heard her voice. On the other end, only wind. A silence so long it pressed against my chest, until my son Ryan finally spoke, his voice low, heavy, and stripped of hesitation. No, Mom. I saw her myself. She was sitting in first class next to a middle-aged man in a gray suit. They were talking close, very close. I froze. The towel slipped from my hand and hit the tile floor with a dull thud. Sunlight blurred in front of me. Only one word kept echoing in my head. Close, close. Just minutes ago, that morning had been so peaceful. Charleston shimmered under the sun, a jasmine breeze drifting in from the Ashley River. I had just finished washing the breakfast dishes, warm water still on my hands. Upstairs, I heard the shower running and Camillami's daughter singing softly. She had called down, "Mom, I'll be quick. Don't start the dishes without me." I laughed. "Take your time, honey. I've got it." Hearing her voice always lightened my heart. After all these years of widowhood, Camila and my little grandson had brought warmth back into this house. I thought that at 67, all I needed was a quiet home and a little laughter in the morning. Then the landline rang. I wiped my hands on my apron, glanced at the screen, and smiled. Ryan Carter. My youngest, an international pilot, is the pride of my life. I answered, my heart tightening with affection. "My boy, you finally called." I could hear his soft chuckle, mixed with the background noise of an airport. "Mom, I've got an hour before takeoff. Just wanted to hear your voice." That simple sentence melted me. "It's been too long, everything okay?" "All good, Mom. It's just something strange." His tone slowed. I caught the sound of a loudspeaker announcement, then silence. "Mom, are you sure Camila is home?" I looked up toward the stairs, still hearing the water running, and chuckled. "Of course she is. She's in the shower upstairs." I said it lightly, wiping my hands, not suspecting a thing, but he stayed quiet, so long that I thought the line had dropped. "Ryan?" I asked, a trace of worry. Then he spoke, carefully, as if weighing each word. "Mom, that's impossible. I'm holding her passport right now. She just boarded my flight to Paris." My world shattered in a second. The first sound to disappear was the birds outside, then the ticking clock. Everything froze. I pressed the receiver tighter, praying I'd misheard, but Ryan's voice came through, clear and cold as air slicing past an open window. "I saw her, Mom. She was with another man." Upstairs, the water stopped. The house fell into complete silence. I tried to breathe, but my chest felt crushed. No way. Camila was here. I had just spoken to her minutes ago. She'd been wearing a white robe, smiling gently, asking if I needed anything from the market. How could she be on a plane to Paris at the same time? "Maybe it's someone with the same name or face," I whispered, clinging to reason. "No, Mom. I'm the one greeting passengers." I said hello to her. She looked right at me and turned away. His words cut through everything. In my mind, two Camilas overlapped, one upstairs and the one on the plane, until I shuddered. I wanted to ask more, but my throat closed. "Son," I whispered, "don't say anything else." I set the phone down and stood still. The sunlit kitchen dimmed into haze, as if covered in fog. I wiped my hands, but they were ice cold. I don't know how long I stood there, only that the sound of water upstairs had stopped, and the bathroom door opened quietly. Footsteps descended the stairs softly, but enough to make me flinch. "Mom, who was that?" Camila asked, her voice as sweet as ever. I turned, forcing a smile, my voice trembling. "Oh, just a friend." She smiled, her hair still damp, the white robe fluttering slightly in the breeze. If it hadn't been for that call, I would have noticed nothing. She poured a glass of water, talked about dinner plans, and asked if I wanted to go shopping with her. I nodded, but my ears rang. I looked down at the towel on the floor, hearing Ryan's words again. She was in first class, very close. For a second, a terrible thought crossed my mind. What if the woman standing in front of me wasn't Camila at all? I shook my head hard, chasing away the madness. But my heart refused to listen, pounded wildly, as if trying to break free. She kept talking, kept smiling, as kind as always, except now, in that smile, I saw something unfamiliar. Her eyes, colder, empty. "Mom, I'll go to the market," she said, slipping a straw bag over her shoulder, still smiling. "Sure, don't forget the tomatoes," I answered, not realizing my voice was shaking. The door closed, leaving me alone in the bright kitchen. Outside, the sun still shone, birds still sang, yet everything felt different. I watched her figure fade beyond the gate, and slowly sat down, hands trembling. Ryan never lies to me. But Camila, the daughter-in-law I loved as my own, had never given me a reason to doubt her. And yet, with one phone call, the world I built on trust began to crack. I looked toward the stairs where a few drops of water still dripped from the floorboards. Everything was the smell of soap, the sound of footsteps, the lingering warmth in the air. But if my son was right, then who had just stood here? Maybe betrayal doesn't always arrive with shouting or tears. Sometimes it comes in a familiar voice, and a silence that stretches too long on the other end of the line. If you're listening to me, stay with me till the end. Because some secrets don't hide in the dark, they live right under the roof you thought was safe. The house used to be filled with laughter. Every brick, every window, carried memories of a time when I still believed family was the most beautiful gift God had ever given me. My husband David Carter and I chose this riverside home 30 years ago, when Charleston was still as peaceful as a painting. On the day we moved in, David was repainting the balcony, joking, "Someday our grandchildren will play here, and you'll be sitting under that magnolia tree drinking tea." I laughed. We weren't rich, but we had enough to live a quiet life, raising our 2 sons with love and honest work. David passed away 10 years ago, a sudden heart attack while cleaning the yard after a storm. That day, the air still smelled of salt and damp earth, and I can still remember the gloves he left on the wooden table. Since then, I have been the keeper of this house, guardian of its memories. Ryan, the younger son, left Charleston early, determined to become a pilot. He once told me on his graduation night, when we stood together under the porch in the misty rain, "Mom, I'll fly high, but I'll always see this roof from the sky." I believed him, and I was proud every time I heard his name on the radio. Flight 203, Captain Ryan Carter, ready for departure. Stephen the Elder stayed in the city and opened a small architecture firm. He married Camila, a girl from Savannah, and brought her to live here with me. From that day, the house seemed brighter. Camila carried a youthfulness I no longer had. She tended the garden, cooked, taught my son how to choose flowers, and always called me Mom in a voice as soft as sunlight. I used to believe God had sent her to fill the emptiness David left behind. Then Noah was born, a little boy with blue eyes just like his grandfather's. Every morning, I would take him into the garden, listen to the stream flowing over old stones, and watch Camila standing in the doorway, hair loose, smiling with a cup of coffee in her hand. On some afternoons, she would hum lullabies to Noah in the wicker chair, while Stephen worked late downstairs, and I embroidered a hydrangea pattern on the tablecloth. Everything seemed so perfect that I didn't notice the light in the house growing colder. It started with small changes. Camila went out more often, just meeting friends, she said. Some days she returned late, wearing a faint trace of perfume, an expensive scent unlike anything she'd ever used before, but I didn't ask. Older adults sometimes choose silence because they fear breaking the fragile peace they've worked so hard to keep. I remember one evening late last fall when I was cleaning the living room to prepare for Christmas. Camila walked in, wearing a deep red sweater, her hair neatly tied back, smiling faintly. "Mom, let me help," she said. She carefully hung the ornaments and adjusted each light. I asked, "Do you want anything else on the tree?" She smiled and replied, "No, it's perfect like this." I didn't realize then that her gentle yet distant smile was the first sign of something I dared not name. But life went on. Stephen was busy with a new project, Ryan was flying around the world, and I kept taking care of Noah, cooking dinner, brewing tea, writing quiet lines in my journal every night. A peaceful day in Charleston. That's what I wrote for months, Until this morning. That call, Ryan's voice, and those words. I can still hear each one replaying in my head. I'm holding her passport in my hand. How can a single sentence turn a mother's world upside down? I stood up and looked around the kitchen. Morning sunlight filtered through the white curtains, glinting off the photo frame on the shelf, a picture from Stephen's birthday last year. The whole family was smiling. Me, Stephen, Camila, and little Noah on her lap. That photo once meant happiness. Now it felt like evidence of betrayal. I walked slowly toward the window, looking out to the garden where Camila had just passed through the gate. She was still herself, graceful as ever, her light blue dress fluttering in the breeze. Everything was real, terrifyingly real, but my heart no longer believed. That afternoon, when Stephen came home, I wanted to tell him, but I couldn't. He looked tired, his shirt still dusty from the sight. I ladled soup into a bowl and set it before him. "Where's Camila?" he asked. "At the market. Should be back soon." Stephen only murmured, then fell silent. We ate quietly. The only sound the clinking of spoons against porcelain. When Camila walked in, carrying the scent of wind and that soft smile, I saw the way Stephen looked at her with the same tenderness I'd once seen in David's eyes. And I knew if what I feared was true, it would destroy him. That night I sat in the living room, hearing the TV upstairs, yet feeling as if I were sinking underwater. I thought about Camila, the first time we met, the way she held my hand at the wedding, and whispered, "I'll take care of Stephen for you." Now, I could only wonder, was she taking care of him or slowly breaking him apart? As night fell, I opened the drawer and took out a small notebook where I usually wrote shopping lists and fragments of memory. I scribbled a few lines. Camila, 9:15 a.m. Shower. Ryan called. Passport, Paris. Just a few words, but my hand trembled. Outside, the wind picked up. The magnolia leaves rustled, whispering something I couldn't yet understand. The house in Charleston, once a haven, now felt foreign. Every door, every stair, seemed to hide a secret I wasn't brave enough to uncover. And when I turned off the light, a cold thought crept into my mind. Perhaps betrayal isn't only about leaving someone, but about walking into the same house, wearing the same face, the same smile, and leaving behind an endless doubt in someone's heart. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay listening to the clock tick, counting seconds towards something inevitable. Across the hallway, Noah was dreaming, his breathing soft and steady. And in the dark, I heard the drip of the upstairs shower drop by drop like a reminder whispering, "She's taking a shower upstairs." If you're listening to me, don't leave yet. Because sometimes the truth doesn't break open in screams, it leaks slowly, like water through the cracks of a peaceful roof. 3 days after that phone call, the atmosphere in the house felt different, though no one said anything. Something lingered in the air, like a thin layer of mist clinging to every object, impossible to wipe away. Camila still woke up early, made breakfast, and still asked me in her usual gentle voice, "Mom, would you like eggs or oatmeal?" I smiled back, but nothing felt real anymore. Every gesture, every smile, made me pause for a moment and ask myself, was that really Camila? That morning, when I brought coffee out to the garden, she was watering the plants. I noticed something small, something I almost missed. Camila was right-handed. I remembered clearly because she once laughed when I teased her, saying, "Right-handed people cut flowers more beautifully." But today, she held the hose in her left hand. The movement was awkward, a little forced, water splashing all over her dress. "You switched hands?" I asked. She looked up, slightly flustered, then gave a nervous smile. "Just wanted to see how it feels, Mom." I nodded, but inside something cold dropped in my chest. At noon, Stephen went to work, and Noah was at school. It was just me and Camila in the quiet house. As I was folding napkins in the living room, she stepped in and asked softly, "Mom, have you seen my notebook?" "Kitchen cabinet, second drawer," I replied. She left, but not before setting down a piece of paper she'd been writing on. I hadn't meant to look, but my eyes caught it anyway. The handwriting was slanted to the left, so unlike Camila's usual script, which tilted right, neat, and firm. I picked up the paper. It felt as if someone had changed their voice mid-sentence. I stood still for a long time, holding that sheet until I heard footsteps coming down the stairs. I quickly set it down and pretended to be wiping the table. "Mom, did I scare you?" she laughed. I shook my head, hiding my trembling hands. "No, I was just thinking about the magnolia tree outside." That afternoon, Noah came home, running to hug me and proudly saying, "Grandma, Mom helped me write today. It's pretty, but not like yesterday." I froze. "Not like yesterday? How so?" He showed me his notebook, 2 pages, one with neat, soft handwriting, the other shaky and uneven. I told Mom, but she said, "Don't mind it. I just changed my writing style." I smiled, forcing my voice to sound calm. "Your mom's hand must be tired, sweetie." But inside, his words echoed like tiny needles, not like yesterday. That evening, Stephen came home late. Dinner was quiet except for the sound of cutlery against plates. Camila asked him, "Would you like me to make tea?" He shook his head, tired. I watched them both, searching their faces for something, but found nothing, just silence. Noah, sitting next to me, suddenly whispered, "Grandma, Mom didn't sing Cielito Lindo today." I froze. That was the lullaby I used to sing to Stephen and Ryan when they were the only Camila and I knew. She learned it from me, saying, "That song makes Noah sleep best." I turned to look at her. She was serving soup, her expression calm, as if she hadn't heard a thing. That night, after everyone went to bed, I crept into the living room. Under the faint light from the porch, I opened the small drawer and wrote in my notebook with trembling hands. Camila uses her left hand. Her voice has changed. Noah says she no longer sings the lullaby. I sat there, listening to the ticking clock, then closed the notebook and hid it in the bottom drawer. The next morning, my neighbor, Mrs. Collins, stopped by to return a ceramic dish Camila had brought over. She set it on the table and said, "Your daughter-in-law is so sweet, but she waved with her left hand yesterday. Strange, I thought she was right-handed." I forced a smile. "Maybe she's trying something new." Mrs. Collins shrugged, then lowered her voice. "By the way," she asked me who just sold the apartment on King Street, said she was looking for her own place. I thought she and Stephen were happy. I froze. Her question dropped into the sunny morning like a cold gust of wind. I quickly found an excuse. She must have been joking. But after Mrs. Collins left, I sat down, my palms icy. The house was too quiet. I could hear the ceiling fan spinning, the water running, and even the wind slipping through the cracks in the door. Every small sound made me alert, as if I were living in a house with a stranger. That afternoon, Camila said she needed to go out to buy things for Noah. I nodded. When she left, I slowly went up to her room, partly to tidy up, to search for answers. The bedroom was neat, nothing unusual. But on the vanity, I found something small. A bottle of perfume I'd never seen, the scent of amber and wood, rich, mature, expensive. I uncapped it, took a breath, and realized it was the same scent I'd noticed faintly the day Ryan called. I gripped the glass bottle tightly, my chest twisted. It was no longer just intuition. All the small, scattered details were now forming one picture. Camila had changed, or the person living here wasn't her. I sat on the edge of the bed, heart pounding. In the mirror, my reflection looked blurred, older, hollow. Could I be losing my mind? Or was I simply too lonely, slipping into paranoia? I didn't know. I only knew that if I stayed silent, I would go mad. That evening, when Camila returned, I watched her carefully. She set the groceries down, smiling. "Mom, I got fresh fish today. I'll make your favorite grilled dish." I murmured, "Thank you." But my eyes never left her hand, her left hand holding the knife, her right hanging idle. It felt like watching an actress play Camila's role skillfully, familiarly, yet with an invisible distance she couldn't conceal. That night, after Noah fell asleep, I stepped onto the porch. Moonlight spilled across the magnolia garden, the night air cool and damp. I sat on the wicker chair, opened my notebook, and wrote the fourth line, "Maybe this isn't her." I set the pen down and looked up at the sky. Clouds drifted slowly, pale and distant. Perhaps old age doesn't make us weaker, but makes us see more clearly what others refuse to see. If you're listening to me, don't leave yet, because once doubt begins, a peaceful life will never return. I always thought that at this age, I would live the rest of my life in peace, tending the garden, embroidering tablecloths, and hearing Noah's laughter every morning. But it seems God had other plans. For 3 nights straight, I couldn't sleep. In the dark, the sound of dripping water from the upstairs shower was steady, like the heartbeat of a secret refusing to be revealed. On Wednesday morning, after Camila took Noah to school, I called Carol, my closest friend. We had known each other since our teaching days at Street Agnes. She was the only one who truly saw my loneliness after David passed away. "Marianne, you sound strange. What's going on?" I hesitated, then told her briefly. The call from Ryan, the passport, Paris, the small changes, the left hand, the handwriting. On the other end, Carol was silent for a long time before speaking softly. "Are you sure you're not mistaken?" "I wish I were, but there are too many coincidences." "Then don't confront her. Watch. Record everything. You were a teacher. You know how to find the truth in the smallest details." After that call, I began keeping notes more carefully. Every day, every action, every word, I wrote them all down. Friday, 9 a.m., she received a strange call, spoke French. Saturday, 3 p.m., left for 3 hours, said she went to the market, but the car never moved from the driveway. I didn't know what I was searching for, but the feeling that the truth was hiding somewhere in this house kept me from sitting still. On Saturday, I told Stephen I wanted to visit Carol. "Sure, Mom. I'll ask Camila to drive you." "No need, dear, I'll walk. It's such a nice day." He smiled, suspecting nothing. I stepped out of the house, but instead of heading toward Carol's, I turned left, down King Street, where small cafes lined the road and a jewelry shop Camila once said she loved. I didn't know exactly what I planned to do, only a gut feeling guided me. 15 minutes later, I saw her. Camila, someone who looked exactly like her, stepped out of a cafe called Le Bleu, wearing a wide-brimmed hat and dark sunglasses. She walked beside a tall, salt-and-pepper-haired man in a gray suit. His hand rested on her back familiarly, and she didn't pull away. I froze in the middle of the street. It was the exact scene Ryan had described. She smiled a smile I had never seen before, half seductive, half defiant. Not the gentle smile of the daughter-in-law I once knew. I crouched behind a tree, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might give me away. When they turned the corner, I followed. My old shoes scraped the pavement, making a faint sound. She stopped in front of the jewelry shop, gazing through the glass window. The man pulled out a velvet box and opened it. Light reflected off a small diamond bracelet, stabbing into my eyes. She touched his hand with a soft, intimate touch. Then both laughed, as if sharing a secret the world had no right to hear. I had to grip the wall to keep from collapsing. I followed them to the parking lot and saw them get into a silver BMW with unfamiliar plates. She sat in the passenger seat, leaned toward him to buckle her seatbelt, and the car rolled away. I stood there, breath uneven. Inside me was both rage and fear for being deceived. Fear because I no longer knew who I was living with. I called Carol. "Are you sure you want to go all the way with this?" Her voice was lower now. "I have to know the truth, Carol. Whatever it is." "All right, I have an old friend who works at the visa office. Send me a copy of Camila's passport. I'll check if there's been any recent travel to Paris." That night, when everyone was asleep, I crept into Camila's room. My heart beat like a drum. I opened the closet, searched through the drawers where she usually kept papers. Nothing. I checked the bottom drawer and found a brown envelope labeled "Personal." I took a deep breath and opened it. Inside were not passports, but 2 photographs. One showed Camila with Stephen and Noah in the yard. The other, Camila again, but with the gray-suited man, taken in Paris with the Eiffel Tower blurred in the background. On the back, written in French, were the words, "Pour toujours," forever. I dropped the photo, my hands shaking. Just then, I heard footsteps in the hallway. I managed to slip the envelope into my pocket before the door opened. "Mom?" Camila's voice is soft, but sharp. "What are you doing in my room?" I turned, forcing calm. "I was just going to grab the bedsheet to wash." She looked at me, eyes piercing through my skin, then smiled. "I already did it. You should rest, Mom." The door closed quietly but firmly. I backed into my room, heart racing. As soon as I sat down, my phone buzzed a message from Carol. "Confirmed. Camila Carter's passport left the U.S. 4 days ago. Flight 203 Paris. Ticket booked by Matthew Rhodes." I stared at the words as tears filled my eyes. Ryan had told the truth, and that man in the photo was Matthew Rhodes. But if the real Camila was in Paris, then who was the woman sleeping in the next room? I sat in silence for a long time. The Charleston night was windless, only the ticking clock breaking the stillness. I opened my notebook and wrote the final line. "No more doubt. The person in this house is not her." The lamp cast a faint glow over the page, making the letters tremble like ripples on water. I closed the notebook and placed it in the drawer, just beneath my wedding photo with David. He once said, "If something is wrong, the light will always find its way in." I looked up at the half-closed door. Light from the hallway slipped through the narrow gap, forming a long line across the wooden floor. I knew then that I had crossed the line between doubt and truth. And once you've seen that light, you can never pretend to be blind again. If you're listening to me, remember sometimes the most terrifying thing isn't losing someone, but living with a stranger who wears their face. That evening, the house was glowing with candlelight. Stephen wanted to celebrate his 36th birthday at home, just with family. He said, "Don't worry about anything, Mom. Camila's taking care of it all." I nodded, trying to hide the unease that had been growing inside me. The woman wearing Camila's face had prepared everything perfectly. White tablecloth, yellow lilies, red wine. The smell of food filled the room, blending with soft jazz music. Everything was perfect, frighteningly perfect. I sat at the head of the table, looking around. Stephen looked happy, and Noah ran around the chairs, his laughter ringing through the room. Only I remained silent. "Mom, would you like more wine?" she asked gently, pouring as her eyes met mine, as if testing me. "That's enough," I said, forcing a smile. Stephen stood and raised his glass. "I want to thank my wife for making everything so beautiful tonight. And thank you, Mom, for being the foundation of this family." She smiled and leaned her head on his shoulder. Everyone clapped. I clapped too, but my hands were cold. Dinner continued in what seemed like a warm atmosphere, but inside me, every small detail rang like an alarm. She called Stephen honey, but with the wrong emphasis. She said, "David loved this fish." Yet David, my husband, despised grilled fish. She poured wine with her left hand. And what nearly took my breath away, she was wearing a new bracelet, thin, with a sapphire stone, identical to the one I'd seen in the photo taken in Paris. I took a deep breath. Right before me, the lie stood so clearly that it was almost naked. "Where did you get that bracelet?" I asked, keeping my voice light. She froze for a moment, then smiled. "Oh, at the weekend market, handmade, Mom." "Really?" I set down my glass. "Because I saw one exactly like it in a picture, taken in Paris." The air in the room froze instantly. Stephen looked up. "Mom, what picture?" I looked straight at the woman. "A photo of you standing next to a man in a gray suit, at the Eiffel Tower, with the words 'forever' written on the back." She put down her glass, the smile fading completely. "Mom, what are you talking about?" Stephen asked, confused. I turned to him, forcing calm. "Ryan called me last week. He saw the real Camila board a flight to Paris. The passport confirms it. And the woman sitting here doesn't know who she is." The fork in Stephen's hand fell onto his plate with a sharp clang. "Mom, please don't. You think I'm old and losing my mind?" I cut him off, my voice trembling but sharp. "Look closely. Since she came back, she writes differently, eats differently, sings differently, and uses her left hand. And tonight, she mentioned your father liked fish when David hated fish all his life." She laughed softly. "You're insulting me, Marianne." "You know my husband's name?" I asked, staring straight into her eyes. Camila never called me by my name. The room felt frozen. Stephen stood up, his face pale. Enough, Mom. I don't want to hear this nonsense. Slowly, I reached into my pocket and pulled out the brown envelope. If you think I'm making this up, then look. I placed the photo on the table. The light reflected off the glossy surface. Stephen leaned down, and I watched the color drain from his face. This is Camila, he whispered. No, I replied. This is the real Camila. And the woman standing in front of you. I didn't finish. She suddenly stood up. Just an old photo, Mom. It's none of your business. Stephen turned to her, his voice shaking. What is this, Camila? Explain. I don't have to explain anything. Her tone changed, sharper, higher, like a blade. She's just trying to make you doubt me. I stood, my voice low but clear. I don't need anyone to believe me. But my son deserves the truth. And if you dare step out of this house tonight, I will call the police. I have proof you're using a false identity. She glared at me, her expression shifting from anger to coldness. You have no idea what you're getting yourself into, Marianne. Her voice no longer trembled, and it was calm, chillingly so. Then she turned and walked quickly upstairs. Stephen sank into his chair, his hands over his head. Oh God, Noah ran to me, hugging my leg. Grandma, what's wrong with Mom? I knelt, holding him close. It's all right, sweetheart. Everything will be okay. But I knew, from that moment on, nothing would ever be okay again. A minute later, the sound of a door slamming echoed through the house. Stephen looked at me, his eyes full of fear and confusion. Mom, are you sure? I nodded. Call Ryan. Right now. Stephen grabbed his phone and dialed. Ryan's voice came through the static mixed with airport noise. Hey bro, what's going on? I took the phone and babbled. Ryan, repeat it. You saw Camila on the flight to Paris, didn't you? His voice was firm. Yes, Mom. I even have the airport security footage. She was with a man, laughing and talking. Stephen went silent. I ended the call and set the phone on the table. Do you believe me now? I asked softly. Stephen slumped in his chair, his eyes red. My God, who have I been living with this whole week? I placed my hand on his shoulder and said quietly, someone who knows how to play a role so perfectly she makes others forget what's real. But no one can play a part forever, son. We sat in silence. The clock ticked steadily. Outside, the night wind swept through the magnolia trees, leaves whispering. I heard slow footsteps upstairs. A door opened. The woman came down, pulling a suitcase behind her. She stopped at the staircase, looking straight at us. You'll regret doubting me, she said, her voice cold, almost emotionless. Then she opened the door, walked out, and disappeared into the night. Stephen moved as if to follow, but I held his arm. Don't. Let her go. We'll handle this the right way. I looked toward the doorway. The streetlight cast a glow across the wooden floor, reflecting off the sapphire bracelet left on the dining table. It still shone, but its light was cold. If you're listening to me, remember justice doesn't always arrive with applause. Sometimes it comes in the moment you choose silence and let the truth speak for itself. The next morning, the house was tranquil. The first light of day slipped through the curtains, falling across the dining table where a few glasses of wine remained untouched. The scent of wine and lilies hung in the air, sweet but suffocating. Stephen sat at the table, his face pale, a cup of cold coffee in his hand. I poured him more and sat down across from him. Have you called the police yet? I asked. Yes, Mom. They said they'll come this morning. His voice was hollow, as if all strength had drained from him. A knock came at the door. 2 officers entered, a man and a woman. The woman introduced herself, Inspector Jacobs, and this is my partner, Detective Miles. They asked me to recount everything. I followed Carol's advice. Not emotional, not judgmental, just the facts. The call from Ryan, the photograph, the strange behavior, the birthday night, and her sudden departure. Jacobs took careful notes, her eyes professional yet filled with quiet sympathy. Mrs. Carter, she said, what you've described is particular. We'll need to collect DNA samples from the house hairbrushes, glasses, and personal items to compare with the medical records of Camila Carter. If there has been an identity switch, we'll know soon. I nodded. I just want to know who she is and why she came into my home. When they left, Stephen remained seated, his eyes blank. I placed my hand on his shoulder. "Are you all right, son?" "No, Mom." He looked up. "I don't know what to believe anymore. If that woman isn't Camila, then where is the real one, and how did I not see it?" I looked at my son and saw shame and guilt in his eyes. I understood, because when you've loved and trusted, you can be blinded by the very light you worship. That afternoon, Ryan called. "I sent you the airport footage," he said, his voice heavy. The camera caught everything. The real Camila left with that man, Matthew Rhodes. I asked a colleague in the airline. He's a businessman from New York who's traveled to Paris several times this year. I asked, "And the woman in my house?" "I don't know, Mom, but there's no record of anyone named Camila Carter returning to the U.S. this week. It could be someone else, using forged documents." I was silent. Part of me wanted to believe the real Camila had just been caught in a momentary mistake. But deeper down, I knew this wasn't simply the betrayal of a woman, but a plan, calculated and deliberate. That night, I couldn't sleep. I went to the kitchen, poured a glass of water, and looked out the window toward the magnolia garden. The thin moonlight shone over every leaf, turning the garden silver. I thought of David. He once said, "True light is never out of sight. It only waits for you to have the courage to look straight at it." And perhaps it was time for me to do just that. The next morning, the police returned. Jacobs carried an envelope. "We have preliminary results, Mrs. Carter. The DNA samples from the hairbrush and glass do not match the medical records of Camila Carter." Stephen stood frozen. "Oh, God. Then who is she?" I asked. "We're tracing her identity, but it appears her real name is Nadia Flores. She was once investigated in Florida for identity fraud and impersonation." I felt the ground drop beneath me. "So, she came into my house, lived with my son, cared for my grandson with someone else's face and name?" Jacobs nodded. "And if you're right, the real Camila may have willingly allowed her to do so. We're searching for both of them now." After they left, Stephen sat in silence for hours. Finally, he spoke softly. "Mom, there's something I haven't told you." I looked at him, my chest tightening. 3 months ago, Camila said she wanted to help my company find an investor. She told me she knew someone, Matthew Rhodes. He promised to fund us if Camila went to Paris to sign the initial deal. I trusted her, so I agreed. I closed my eyes, and that's when they disappeared. Stephen nodded, voice breaking. If it weren't for me, she wouldn't have had the chance. I didn't blame my son. But perhaps it was our blind trust that opened the door for all this tragedy. That afternoon, Carol came by. She brought an apple pie, as she always did, but her eyes were filled with worry. "I heard the news, Marianne." "I don't know what to feel anymore," I said, my voice hoarse. "Anger, fear, or emptiness. You should feel strong," she said, taking my hand. "Not many people dare to face the truth like you did." I gave a faint smile. "The truth doesn't make you strong, Carol. It just leaves scars." When she left, I began tidying the dining room. By chance, I found a handkerchief under the chair where the fake Camila had sat, embroidered with the letters N.F., stitched in gold thread, delicate and fine. I picked it up, my fingers trembling. Nadia Flores. I knew it wasn't an accidental remnant. It was a message or a warning. Night fell. Stephen called the lawyer while I sat writing in my familiar notebook. Real name, Nadia Flores. Camila missing, Stephen's guilt. I'm still here, guarding the house, guarding what truth remains. The clock struck midnight. The wind swept through the porch, carrying the rustling of magnolia leaves. I wondered if the real Camila was still alive or if she had chosen to disappear, letting someone else wear her face and live her life. I didn't have an answer. But in the mirror, I saw that the woman staring back at me no longer looked afraid. Maybe once you've reached the end of betrayal, darkness no longer frightens you. Before going to bed, I opened the window and let the night air in. The Charleston sky was full of stars. I whispered to myself, "David, if you can hear me, I promise I'll see this through, because this isn't just their story's justice for our family. And in that moment I realized, sometimes, the journey to truth doesn't begin with gunfire or vengeance, but with an older woman, pen in hand, brave enough to write down every small detail the world chooses to ignore. If you're listening to me, remember, truth never comes quickly. It comes slowly, like light seeping through the night, visible only to those patient enough to wait. 3 days later, the police called again. Inspector Jacobs's voice came softly through the phone, careful, as if she feared breaking the fragile air in the room. "Mrs. Carter, we have new information. The real Camila Carter has been found in Paris. She's at a hotel near the Seine River, and she wants to speak with you directly." I froze, gripping the receiver tightly. "She's alive?" "Yes, and it seems she wasn't coerced. She said she's ready to cooperate if you agree to a video call." I was silent for a long time, my emotions twisted together: relief, anger, hurt, and confusion, swirling like the wine left in an unwashed glass. Finally, I said quietly, "Connect the call." 10 minutes later, the police computer screen flickered with a grainy image connection from Paris. Camila appeared. But it was her brown hair, the gentle eyes, the familiar mouth. But her gaze was no longer that of the daughter-in-law who used to hug me every morning. "Mom," she whispered. My throat tightened. "Don't call me that." Behind her, the Paris light streamed through the window, illuminating her cold face. A man, Matthew Rhodes, walked briefly through the frame, then disappeared. I took a deep breath. "Do you know what you've done, Camila?" She was silent, then answered softly, "I do, and I'm sorry. But you don't understand." I laughed in a dry, bitter sound. "I don't understand?" "You disappeared, let someone impersonate you, live in my house, hold my grandson. You say I don't understand?" She met my eyes. "That woman, Nadia, is not a stranger. She's my half-sister. We grew up together in an orphanage in Mexico. When I met Stephen, I promised her that if I ever had the chance, I would help her escape that life. And I did. I brought her to America, gave her papers, taught her manners, how to speak, how to live, wanted her to have a better life." I trembled. "By giving up your own?" "No," she said, her voice breaking. "I only meant for her to replace me temporarily for a few days while I went to Paris to finalize the deal. But Matthew took advantage of both of us." Her voice quivered, her eyes glistening. I thought I could control it. But then everything spun out of control. I realized Nadia had fallen in love with Stephen, and Stephen, at times, couldn't tell the difference. My body went cold. "What did you just say?" Camila was silent for a long moment before answering. "I don't blame him. Nadia looked so much like me that it was unbelievable. The only difference was in her eyes. And in my weakness, I let it happen." I gripped the edge of my chair to steady myself. "You realize what you've done has destroyed my family?" "I know, and I regret it. But I wanted to confess. I've contacted the police, turned in my real passport, and told them everything." "And Nadia?" I asked. "She's gone. Matthew was arrested this morning for financial fraud. Nadia wasn't with him." I closed my eyes. For a moment, I didn't know whether to feel relief or heartbreak. Camila's voice broke as she continued, "Mom, I know I've ruined everything, but please, I ask just one thing. Tell Stephen I still love him. And tell Noah, his mother made mistakes, but she never stopped loving him." I said nothing, not because I forgave her, but because no words could pin down that moment. Jacobs rested her hand on my shoulder, signaling to end the call. I looked at the screen, Paris light reflecting on Camila's face. She was crying, but her tears no longer softened me. "Camila," I said, my voice low and steady, "I'll tell Stephen what's necessary, but the rest you must face it, before the law and before your own conscience." She nodded, tears falling. "I understand. I just want to say one last thing. Without Nadia, I would have died in that orphanage long ago. I owe her my life. But now I know no one has the right to turn another person into their shadow, not even out of kindness." The screen went black. The room was silent. Jacobs exhaled. I think you did the right thing. She'll cooperate. We'll issue a warrant for Nadia. On the way home, Stephen said nothing. We walked along the riverbank, the cold wind blowing, the water reflecting the lights. Mom, he finally spoke. I don't know how to face this. Part of me still loves her. Another part feels everything's gone. I took his hand. Sometimes, Stephen, love doesn't mean holding on. It means letting go at the right time so they can face what they've done. When we got home, Noah was asleep. I went to his room and sat beside his bed. I stroked his hair and whispered, Sweetheart, when you grow up, don't trust perfect faces. Trust the ones who make you feel safe. Then I went to the porch, opened my notebook, and wrote a new line. The truth saves no one. It only shines, showing us where to go next. The Charleston breeze carried the scent of salt water and the chirping of insects. I closed my eyes, feeling my heart finally empty. But in that emptiness, there was room for light to enter. I looked up at the sky and thought of David. You see, don't you? I murmured. I did what you taught me, to look straight into the light, even when it hurts. If you're listening to me, remember sometimes justice doesn't come from the courtroom, but from the moment you dare to say, I know and I'm not afraid anymore. 2 weeks after the call from Paris, the house by the Charleston River felt completely different. There were no more strange footsteps on the stairs, no more dripping water in the night. Only the sparrows tapping on the window each morning, and Noah's laughter echoing through the magnolia garden. The police had finished their investigation. The real Camila was awaiting extradition, while Nadia was still missing. Stephen had gone back to work, but his face looked older. Sometimes I still saw him sitting alone on the porch, his eyes fixed on the river, as if waiting for a boat that would never return. I didn't interfere. Everyone needs their own way to face loss. I simply kept my old role, brewing coffee, making breakfast, taking Noah to school, and each evening reading him stories where there was no betrayal, only light. One morning, Noah asked, Grandma, is Mom coming back? I bent down and touched his cheek. Your mom is very far away, but she still loves you. Some people have to go far to learn how to come home. He nodded, understanding more than a 6-year-old should. I watched him playing in the yard, sunlight glinting off his hair, and realized that sometimes justice isn't about making someone pay, but about knowing the ones you love are safe. That afternoon, Stephen came home early. He brought a small pot of lavender and set it on the table. Mom, I remembered you love this scent. I smiled. Lavender doesn't just calm the air, Stephen. It calms the memories. He sat across from me, silent for a long time. Mom, I filed for divorce. I nodded. You did the right thing. But it's strange, he whispered. I don't feel angry anymore, just empty. I placed my hand over his. Emptiness is the first step toward peace, Stephen. Because only when your heart is empty enough can the light come in. That day, for the first time in weeks, we had dinner together without talking about the past. Only the sound of knives and spoons, and Noah chattering about his class, about his new dance teacher who was like a princess in a movie. I looked at my son and grandson, and warmth slowly returned to my chest. Late at night, I went out to the porch. Charleston was quiet, the sound of water brushing the shore, the scent of lavender drifting through the air. I opened my old notebook and wrote, Justice has come, but peace doesn't arrive at the same time. It strolls, like a child on sand, hurried but certain. The next day, Noah and I cleaned the living room. When we lifted the rug beneath the table, I found something left behind, a handkerchief embroidered with the letters N.F. I picked it up and examined it closely. Light filtered through the fabric, making the golden stitches shimmer like a beautiful scar. I wasn't trembling anymore. I folded the handkerchief, placed it in a small wooden box, then carried it out to the magnolia tree and buried it beneath its roots. That's enough, I whispered. Stay here, with the past. That afternoon, Carol came by. She brought an apple pie, setting it on the table with a smile. You look better, she said. I'm learning how to breathe again, I replied. Breathing is a victory already, Marianne. We sat together on the porch, watching Noah chase butterflies, sunlight dancing through the trees in golden stripes. After a while, Carol said, "You know, maybe the most miraculous thing is that at our age, we still have the chance to begin again." I smiled. "Not maybe, Carol. Certainly." That night, Stephen knocked on my door. "Mom, I think I'll take Noah to the beach this weekend, just the three of you to let him feel what a new life is like." I nodded. "Go, son." The sea heals things the land never can. He hesitated at the doorway, his eyes softening. "Mom, I'm sorry. I trusted too much, and I didn't see how hard you tried to protect me." I smiled gently. "We all have our own lessons to learn, Stephen, and I'm just grateful you're still here." He hugged me tightly. It had been so long since I'd felt my son's embrace, not the embrace of a man collapsing, but of one learning to stand again. After they left, the house was mine alone. I opened the window, letting the river breeze in, carrying the scent of salt and moisture. David's old photograph on the table seemed to smile. I looked into his eyes and whispered, "You see, don't you?" In the end, everything came back to peace. I brewed a fresh pot of tea, poured 2 cups, one for me, one for memory. The afternoon light poured across the wall, sliding over the family photos. Each face told a story. David faith, Stephen mistake, Camilla misstep, Noah future. And me, just the one clear-headed enough to gather the broken pieces into something that could go on. Before the sun set, I stood on the porch, watching my shadow stretch across the wooden floor. In that silence, I understood. Emotional justice isn't about making others pay. It's when you no longer let pain define who you are. If you're listening to me, remember some losses don't need replacing. They just need to be set down in the right place, so your hands are free to hold peace. Charleston entered spring with a light as soft as silk. After months of rain and wind, the rows of magnolias bloomed white along the street leading to the river. I opened the window earlier than usual, letting the breeze carry in the scent of damp earth and the distant sound of church bells. On the table, the lavender pot had begun to bloom, purple, fragile but resilient. I poured a cup of tea and sat by the window, watching the rippling water. Since Stephen took Noah to the beach, the house had been quiet again, but no longer lonely. I spent the morning writing in the notebook the police once called evidence. Now it has become my healing journal. Day 62. Since the truth was revealed, everything in the house is calm, so am I. At noon, I went to the local market. The wind carried the smell of grilled fish, waffles, and flower vendors, calling out their prices. I stopped by Mrs. Jenkins's vegetable stall where the seller, who had known me for years, was. "You look younger, Marianne," she said with a gentle smile. "I guess the sky has finally stopped raining." I smiled back. "You're right. It just took me one long winter to realize I still love the light." On my way home, I stopped by a new shop that had just opened, Haven Home. A wooden sign read, "A space for women to rebuild." The owner, a woman in her 50s with silver-streaked hair and a steady smile, invited me in. "My name is Elise. We opened this place for women who want to learn crafts, cooking, or simply have a place to begin again." The phrase, "begin again," made me pause. "Do you accept someone to teach storytelling?" I asked. Elise smiled. "We were looking for exactly that person." That afternoon, I came home with a new feeling, as if someone had opened a door inside my heart. I wrote in my notebook, "Maybe justice isn't only light, it's also a seed. Once you plant it, it grows back in another form, sometimes as faith." The next day, I started going to Haven Home. The classroom was small, sunlight streaming through wooden windows, the smell of fresh paint mixed with coffee. The women sat around the tables, widowed, some homeless, some newly escaped from violent marriages. All of them carried in their eyes the blurred light of people once extinguished but not yet defeated. I told them how I used to write down every little detail in my notebook, from the sound of water in the bathroom to the embroidered handkerchief with 2 strange letters. I said, "Sometimes writing isn't to accuse anyone, but to remind yourself that it really happened and that you survived." They listened quietly. A young woman named Laura let tears roll down her cheeks. "I used to think no one could understand what it feels like to be betrayed by your own family, but now I know someone does. I held her hand. "We're not alone, Laura. Even our wounds can turn into light, if we're brave enough to look at them." The class ended in laughter. Elise walked over and handed me a small wooden plaque, Marianne Carter Story Mentor. I looked at the hand-carved letters, my heart sinking with emotion. Not because of the title, but because, for the first time in years, I felt useful, not as a mother or a wife, but as myself. That evening, Stephen called from the beach. The screen lit up with Noah's smiling face, his hair wet with salt water. "Grandma, I built the biggest sand castle on the beach. It even has stairs, just like our house." I laughed. "Well done, little architect." Stephen leaned in, his voice lighter than before. "Mom, I just wanted to thank you for not giving up." I looked at him and said slowly, "No one truly stands up alone, Stephen. But what matters is that you chose not to stay down." After the call, I stepped out onto the porch. The city lights reflected across the river in thousands of golden streaks. I thought of David, the man who once taught me that true light isn't found outside, but within the heart of the one who dares to look straight at it. "You see," I whispered, "I'm learning to live again, not for anyone else, but for myself." The following week, Haven Home held a small exhibition. Each woman wrote a short piece about the moment she began again. I stood and read mine aloud to the room. I once thought justice meant making the guilty pay, but I've learned that true justice is when you can lift your head from the ruins and still want to plant flowers. When I finished, the room fell silent for a few seconds, then erupted in warm applause. Elise came over and said softly, "You didn't just teach them to tell stories, Marianne. You made them believe they still have one to tell." That night, I returned home late. The streetlights cast a golden glow across the wall. In the garden, a few magnolia petals had fallen, but their fragrance lingered strongly. I sat on the porch steps, opened my notebook, and wrote, "Day 90. I have begun again." Not with a new wedding or an apology, but with real laughter in a brightly lit room. I closed my eyes, listening to the sound of water brushing the shore, and for the first time in months, I felt an unfamiliar peace. Charleston was quiet that night, like an old song, and I knew the new season had arrived not just outside the window, but within me. If you're listening to me, remember, sometimes the most beautiful thing isn't beginning again with someone else, but learning how to begin again with yourself. The gala of the Aurora Women's Fund took place at the Riverside Hotel, the building standing right on the bank of the Charleston River, where the lights reflected on the water like 1,000 shards of crystal. Haven Home had been invited because of the stories we had written that had moved people. Elise told me, "You should speak, Marianne. They need to hear from someone who's walked through hell and still believes in the light." I laughed, half anxious, half touched. "I'm not someone for the stage." "No," Elise smiled, "you're someone for the truth." I wore the deep blue dress Carol once picked for me and pinned on David's silver brooch. Looking in the mirror, I realized the woman reflected there was no longer the trembling widow from last year, but someone who knew who she was. The ballroom shimmered with candlelight and lavender flowers. Soft jazz floated through the air, and wine glasses glittered in guests' hands. Elise introduced me. "The woman you're about to hear is not a speaker, but proof that emotional justice is real. Please welcome Marianne Carter." I stepped onto the stage. The lights shone warm but hazy on my face. I took a deep breath and began slowly. "I used to think justice was a verdict, but now I know it's a journey through loss, betrayal, and the choice not to become bitter." The entire room fell silent. I spoke briefly about Haven Home, about the women learning to rewrite their lives, and ended with this: "We cannot change the past, but we can choose how to tell it with compassion, not resentment." Applause filled the room. I bowed and stepped down. Elise hugged me. "I told you. You belong to the light." I smiled, but when I turned, a figure stopped my heart. A woman stood by the bar, dark hair loose, tall and slender, Nadia. She didn't look at me. Her gaze was fixed on the river, her face shimmering in candlelight. I stood still for a moment, then walked toward her. When I softly called her name, she startled and turned. "Mrs. Carter," she whispered, trembling. "I didn't plan to come. I just wanted to see you once. I looked closely. She was thinner, her eyes shadowed, but in them there was no longer deceit, only remorse. I thought you were gone forever. Nadia lowered her head. I ran after Camila was arrested. I was scared. But then I heard about Haven Home, about what you were doing. I don't know why, but I wanted to come. I stayed silent. The music shifted to What a Wonderful World. The light softened. What did you find while running away? I asked. She lifted her head, voice breaking. Nothing. Only my own face staring back at me in every mirror, and regret. We stood side by side for a while, neither of us speaking. Then Nadia reached into her bag and took out something wrapped in silk paper. I've kept this since that day. I think you should have it back. I unfolded the handkerchief embroidered with the initials NF. I sighed. You kept it? Yes, because it reminds me that lies, no matter how intricate, can never erase the truth. I folded the handkerchief again and placed it back in her hands. Keep it. Not to atone, but to remember that you survived. She looked up, eyes glistening. You don't hate me? I shook my head. I've spent a lifetime hating Nadia. Now I just want peace. Moments later, Elise called me back on stage to receive the plaque honoring Haven Home. When I turned around again, Nadia was gone, as if she had come only to return the last missing piece of the past. That night, after everyone had left, I stayed behind with Elise to clean up. A few half-empty wine glasses remained on the tables, lavender petals scattered softly across the linens. Elise looked at me and asked gently, You all right? I think I am. Everything's closed now. No, Marianne, she said softly. It's not closing, it's opening to a new chapter. I stepped out onto the balcony, the river breeze brushing against me, carrying the salt of the night. The city sparkled across the water, and in the distance came the sound of a street trumpet. I looked at the flowing river, picturing all the faces that had passed through my life. Camila, Nadia, Stephen, Noah Heach, each one a note in a larger symphony I could not control, but had learned to listen to. I took out my phone, opened the camera, and captured the scene: lights, river, and moonlight. Then I posted it on Haven Home's page with the caption, Sometimes emotional justice doesn't come when someone apologizes, but when you're strong enough not to need the apology anymore. The post spread faster than I expected. By morning, hundreds of comments filled the page, women from everywhere sharing their own stories. One wrote, Thank you, Marianne. I filed for divorce today. I'm scared, but after hearing you, I know I'm not alone. I read each message, eyes wet, heart full. The next day, when I arrived at Haven Home, Elise hugged me and whispered, You know, that's what real justice is when one person's story becomes a light for someone else. I smiled and looked out the window, where the Charleston sky was impossibly blue. Maybe, after all, the light I'd spent years searching for wasn't on the horizon, was in the path I had already walked. If you're listening to me, remember that when you choose to forgive, you're not weak. You're simply giving your heart its freedom back. 2 months after the Aurora Gala, Charleston had entered early summer. Sunlight spread gold across the river, and the breeze through the magnolia trees sent white petals falling like slow rain. I sat in the kitchen, listening to Noah's laughter on the porch. He had just learned to ride his bike. Each turn of the wheel made my heart tremble softly. Stephen had moved back into the house by the river, not because he needed a place to stay, but because this place had become home again. He repaired the old room, fixed the broken window frame, and repainted the walls in blue dusk, the color David once chose. In the mornings, I taught Noah to read while Stephen made coffee. In the evenings, we ate dinner on the porch, listening to crickets and the scent of warm wood carried by the wind. Those simple things, long gone for years, had returned like life's quiet reward. One afternoon, Stephen brought home a new wooden frame. Mom, I think it's time to hang up the old photos again. I nodded. He opened the box stored in the cabinet, photos covered in dust. Our wedding, Stephen's first birthday, the picture of Camila smiling when Noah was born. I picked up the last one, my gaze lingering on that bright smile. No bitterness now, only tenderness. I placed the photo on the lowest corner of the wall, next to the Haven home frame, and said softly, "So Noah will know someday that his mother once smiled beautifully." Stephen stood still. "Mom, I don't know how to thank you enough." I smiled. "Don't thank me, just live better." That evening we hung all the photos on the living room wall together. I called that wall the Wall of Strength. Each frame stood as proof of pain, of love, of the human ability to rise again. When the final photo was fixed in place, the evening light streamed through the window, glinting off those faces' warm, deep glow, as if the past had finally found peace. The next day, Haven Home sent an invitation to create an exhibition called The Women Who Stood Up, inspired by my story. Elise called, her voice bright with excitement. "We'll place your wall photo right at the center of the gallery. It's not just a wall, Marianne, it's a symbol." I smiled. If it helps someone believe they can start again, then it's worth it. On the opening day, I brought Noah with me. When we entered, I saw hundreds of photos hung around the room. Women of all ages smiling, crying, standing in their homes, on bridges, in front of small shops. Beneath each photo was a handwritten line, "I'm still here." Elise squeezed my hand. "See? Light travels fast when someone dares to light it." During the ceremony, a stranger approached and took my hand. "Mrs. Carter, I just wanted to say, after hearing your story, I went back to college. At 58. I looked into her eyes, bright, wet, and strong, and realized that sometimes our journey doesn't end with forgiveness, but with giving strength to others. In the late afternoon, Noah and I went home. He held in his hand a seashell he had picked up during a recent trip. "Grandma, I'll put this on Mom's desk so she knows I miss her." I stroked his hair and said gently, "Yes, do that. She'll smile when she sees it." That night I sat on the porch. Moonlight shimmered on the river, glinting through the window glass. I heard crickets, soft waves, and Noah's little laugh echoing from his room. I remembered the months when I used to sit here with trembling hands and a heavy heart. Now, in the same place, there was only peace. I poured myself a small glass of wine and placed it beside David's photo. "You see," I whispered, "the house has laughter again." I opened my old journal. The last page read, "Day 180. I survived. I forgave. And I am living again, not in dreams, but in mornings filled with real sunlight." Suddenly I thought of the women at Haven Home, the faces that had once arrived with hollow eyes and left with smiles. They had taught me that age cannot drain us, only fear can. I picked up my pen and wrote, "I'm 67, and I'm still learning how to live a little more each day." It turns out, beginning again doesn't require youth, only courage. A soft breeze swept across the porch, carrying the scent of lavender from the garden. I looked out at the river where the moonlight stretched across the water like silver silk and whispered to myself, "Marianne Carter has ended a chapter, but the woman standing here is still writing." If you're listening to me, remember, sometimes happiness isn't loud like applause. It's when you sit in an old house, watching light spill through the window, and know that you have returned whole and free. 1 year after hanging the final photo on the Wall of Strength, spring returned to Charleston. The city felt quieter, the sky clear and blue, and the river breeze carried the scent of lavender from the small garden in front of the house. I sat on the porch that once sheltered pain, but had now become the roof of peace. On the table, a steaming cup of herbal tea sat beside the closed Second Life journal. I no longer wrote in it, not because there was nothing left to tell, but because I had finally learned to live the story myself. Haven Home had now become a community project sponsored by the Aurora Fund. Each month, dozens of women came with memories, tears, and the desire to be reborn. I no longer taught them how to tell stories. I simply sat with them and listened. They called me Miss Marianne, the gatekeeper for souls wanting to cross their past. This morning, Elise came by with a bouquet of freshly picked lavender and set it on the table. "We're opening a new branch in Savannah," she said. "Can you believe it? The place that used to be the end is now the beginning for someone else." I smiled. Maybe life is fair in its own way, just slower than we wish. In the afternoon, Stephen stopped by with Noah. The two of them sat outside and the boy drew the Wall of Strength with crayons. When I stepped out, Noah looked up. "Grandma, I'm adding Miss Elise and Mrs. Jenkins too, because they're strong. I laughed, warmth blooming in my chest. You're right, Noah. Anyone who stands up after falling is strong. Stephen placed a hand on my shoulder. Mom, I just got promoted to branch director. But more importantly, I'm learning to slow down. I looked at my son, once broken but now steady again. Not through miracles, but through time and patience. That's good, Stephen. No one needs to run once they've found home. As the sunset arrived, I walked around the garden. Beneath the magnolia tree, where I had buried the embroidered handkerchief marked NF, a lavender plant had grown. I bent down, touched the petals, and whispered, "Every memory, if placed in the right spot, can bloom." That evening, I lit a candle. Its light shimmered against the photo wall. David's picture still stood in the center, surrounded by family, friends, the women of Haven Home, and one space deliberately so. Whenever someone asked, I only smiled and said, "That's for those still finding their way back to themselves." I opened my email and found a new message from Laura, the young woman from my first class. "Miss Marianne, I've just opened a small cafe in North Carolina. I named it the Second Light. I remember you once said, 'The first light comes from pain. The second comes from choosing to love life despite it.' I wanted to thank you for helping me see the second light." I read it again and again, tears falling as I smiled. Outside, the crickets sang steadily. I poured more tea and looked out toward the river, where silver moonlight spread across the water. The view hadn't changed, but I had. I no longer counted the days since loss. I began counting the days I lived in peace. Over the past year, I have learned many things. That forgiveness isn't forgetting, but choosing to stop carrying the wound everywhere. That love never disappears. It simply changes form from attachment to freedom. That sometimes the bravest thing is not to leave, but to stay with yourself. Before bed, I opened my old journal and wrote one final line. Day 365. I began again. Not because the world became gentler, but because I became gentler with myself. I closed the notebook, blew out the candle, and in the moment darkness filled the room, I saw that the light remained not from the lamp, not from the moon, but from within. If you're listening to me, remember this. No one is ever too late to be loved, to live, or to begin again. I am Marianne Carter, and I am proof that sometimes the most beautiful things happen after you think your story has ended. And if you've ever been through something like this, leave a comment and tell me where you're listening, because maybe your story will be the next light on this journey.